Carolyn had noticed the little girl wandering nearby the restaurant for some time. The child would often peer through the large windows, captivated by the Christmas tree in the centre of the dining hall. The tree was adorned with bright lights and unique ornaments, but the most fascinating element was the train. A red locomotive ran along a carefully laid track, circling the tree from bottom to top all day long. It truly was a magical sight. The girl from the street was drawn to the moving train, frequently returning to the window to admire it. Carolyn understood the girl's fascination. Even she and her colleagues had been mesmerized by the spectacle at first. The girl was clearly from a troubled background. In the cold December weather, she wore only a cheap, ill-fitting jacket and boys' sneakers, with no scarf to protect her from the chill. Her thin neck was exposed, and her eyes held a deep sadness and hunger. Carolyn herself had moved to the city from her village. She studied to be a confectioner and worked part-time as a waitress at the restaurant. In her village there were many struggling families, but the community looked out for one another, providing food and warm clothing for the children in need. This little girl, who appeared to be no more than 9 or 10, had been wandering alone for hours, cold and hungry. Carolyn's heart ached for her, reminded of her own younger sister back home. The thought of her sister facing such hardships was unbearable. Carolyn felt a deep compassion for the girl and wished she could help in some way. Carolyn entered the decorated hall once again to deliver an order to the guests. Through the window she saw the little girl still standing there. What was she doing out in the cold? The child gazed at the Christmas tree and the toy train running through its fluffy branches, perhaps dreaming of something. Carolyn finished serving the table and was about to return to the kitchen when she met the gaze of the little vagabond girl. The child's eyes held a desperation and hopelessness far beyond her years. Carolyn couldn't bear it any longer. She marched resolutely toward the exit, not the main one, but the staff entrance. She grabbed someone's coat, not bothering to find her own. A moment later she stood before the girl. The child looked at her with surprise and hope. "Hello," Carolyn smiled. "You must be freezing." The girl nodded slowly. "Come inside and warm up. Your nose is almost blue." The girl rubbed her slightly upturned nose, as if suddenly remembering it existed. "You need to warm up and have some tea. I have cookies in the kitchen." "Cookies?" The girl's eyes lit up with joy. Carolyn knew the manager wouldn't approve of a poor child in their kitchen. Andre was a strict boss, but he had left for a year-end meeting at the head office, which would likely last for hours. By the time Andre returned, the girl would be gone, warm and fed. It was a small act of kindness, and the girl would still face cold and hungry days ahead, but at least for today she would be a little happier than usual. And so they found themselves in the kitchen. The waitstaff on duty understood Carolyn's desire to care for the homeless girl. Chiara, the cook, took the little guest under her wing, immediately placing a steaming bowl of soup and a basket of rolls before her. The girl pounced on the food like a hungry wolf cub. Only Chef Paul looked at the child with a hint of disdain. "Why did you bring her here? This violates all hygiene standards. You'll bring in lice or fleas." Carolyn knew Paul would grumble, but wouldn't go further. He wouldn't chase the girl away or tell Andre about her. Paul was kind. He just liked to put on a tough act. In fact, he even fried an egg in the shape of a heart, especially for the little girl, and garnished it with vegetables. "What's your name, dear?" Chiara asked, sitting next to the girl, who had begun to eat more slowly, savouring each bite now that her initial hunger was satisfied. "Terrell," the girl replied. "Terrell?" Carolyn echoed in surprise. "That's a beautiful name." "Yes, everyone says so," little Terrell replied with a pleased smile. Bonita, Terrell's mother, didn't know where the name had come from when it popped into her head. Perhaps she had heard it on a TV show or read it in a romance novel long ago. Bonita had once loved such stories, dreaming of a life like those of the heroines, beautiful and cared for by a loving man. But her life hadn't turned out that way. At 16, Bonita ran away from home without much thought or regret. There wasn't much of a home to leave behind. She had grown up in a village, in a dilapidated shack, under the care of an elderly great-grandmother. But her great-grandmother didn't pay much attention to raising the girl. There was never a hint of warmth or closeness between them. So, when a long-haul trucker invited the young Bonita to join him, she agreed without hesitation. Nothing held her back in her home village, and she dreamed of a better life. The man seemed deeply in love with her, and they lived together for 4 years in his small apartment. Though they never officially married, they had 2 children, born a year apart. However, Bonita's boyfriend eventually found a new love, leaving Bonita with no home, no income, and with 2 young children to care for. However, Bonita met another man, older than her ex. She had more children with him, but when he passed away, his relatives evicted her and her children from his place. Once again, Bonita was alone, now with 4 children to feed, clothe and care for. Life became an endless struggle. Bonita moved from one friend's place to another, sometimes staying with various men. She tried to work, but her lack of skills limited her to cleaning jobs. Also, frequent pregnancies, young children, and her growing dependence on alcohol made holding down a job nearly impossible. Drinking was the only way she could cope with the harsh reality of her life. It was into this chaotic world that Terrell was born. By then, her mother had managed to secure a place to live. During a period of sobriety, she reached out to social services, local administration, and even journalists, sharing her story and seeking help for herself and her children. Bonita was shown compassion and support, and she was even given a 3-room apartment. Though it was in a rough neighborhood and in poor condition, the woman was overjoyed to finally have a place of her own. At first, Bonita even tried to turn her life to the best. She found work as a janitor in the housing cooperative and planned to renovate the apartment, replace the windows and redo the wallpaper. However, these tasks proved too daunting for her. She was accustomed to coping with life differently, often turning to alcohol, and soon slipped back into her old habits. 5 children, yes, 5, now crammed into the small apartment. They lived impoverished, wearing hand-me-downs from neighbours or clothes given by the social services centre. Terrell, one of the children, knew no other life. She understood that a different existence was possible, seeing her classmates and other children in the neighbourhood, but she had never experienced it herself. She was used to the older siblings looking after the younger ones, and knew that a good meal was a rare treat. Whenever the opportunity arose, she would eat as much as she could. She also understood the importance of maintaining the appearance of well-being in front of others, pretending to be like the other children. Otherwise, they might be sent to an orphanage, which her mother often threatened would be a terrible place where children were beaten and humiliated. Terrell valued her family despite their poverty. She loved her mother and siblings and feared being sent away. Though they lived in poverty, no one was ever beaten or mistreated. Her mother's friends often came in the evenings, locking themselves in the kitchen to drink and talk late into the night. Terrell disliked these gatherings. Her mother would sleep all day afterward, sometimes snoring loudly, other times lying so still that Terrell would check to see if she was breathing. It was frightening. Her mother was kind to all her children, often hugging the little ones and telling them she would do anything for them. But these were just words. She rarely followed through with actions. Despite the challenges, Terrell was deeply attached to her mother. She considered her the kindest and most beautiful woman, hoping that one day her mother would find a good job and stop drinking. Every New Year's Eve, Terrell would make the same wish as the clock struck midnight. Besides, New Year's Day was always magical for Terrell. Her mother would always prepare something special, like roasted chicken or goulash. This festive meal was perhaps the only tradition in their family, but it was cherished. The anticipation of New Year's would begin for Terrell with the first snowfall. As soon as snowflakes started to dance in the air, her heart would flutter with excitement. Though her mother couldn't afford gifts, the delicious home-cooked dinner, the intimate family gathering, heartfelt conversations, and the ritual of making a wish as the clock struck midnight, all of this was pure magic for Terrell. At school, Terrell struggled with her studies. She envied classmates who seemed to grasp concepts effortlessly. Despite her best efforts, some subjects remained incomprehensible to her. Her teacher, however, was kind and patient, often explaining difficult topics to Terrell and occasionally giving her small gifts, usually school supplies. The teacher saw the financial struggles of Terrell's mother and did what she could to help. That day the girl walked home from school, upbeat. The school year was almost over, and holidays were just around the corner. She loved school, the clean, warm, bright building, the delicious meals in the cafeteria, and her kind teacher. However, getting up in the morning was tough, especially if her mother had been out late the night before. Terrell looked forward to catching up on sleep during the break. She decided to take a stroll through the festive city centre instead of going straight home. Home was cold, with old window frames that let in the chill. Her mother wanted to install new plastic ones, but money was tight. There was never enough food at home, and the place was a mess from the previous night's gathering. Her mother was likely still asleep, recovering from the late-night festivities with friends. Terrell hoped those friends had left. The city centre was beautifully decorated with lights and festive storefronts. One window in particular caught her eye, a restaurant with a stunning Christmas tree inside. What truly captivated her was the tiny red train that ran along the tree's branches. She found herself returning to the window again and again, drawn like a magnet to the enchanting sight. As she prepared to take one last look before heading home in the cold, a young woman emerged from the restaurant. She was remarkably beautiful, with tall, slender features and blue eyes like an actress. She smiled at Terrell and invited her inside. It felt like a Christmas miracle, though Terrell no longer believed in magic. This moment made her wonder if she had been wrong. Inside, the restaurant was like a scene from a movie, filled with warmth and wonder. Elegant tables, well-dressed people, though Terrell saw it all from a distance and only briefly, as the young woman led her into the kitchen, where tantalizing aromas filled the air. Terrell felt a bit embarrassed. What if these people, the chefs, the waiters, chased her away, a poor girl from the streets? She was used to being shooed away, but the woman with kind eyes placed a bowl of soup in front of Terrell. A man who didn't look very friendly fried her an egg shaped like a heart, something Terrell had never seen before. Someone slipped her a candy, and another person gently ruffled her hair. Terrell savoured every bite, relishing the delicious food. She had been hungry for so long, and now this feast. The people around her looked at her with kindness and pity. "Do you have a home?" Carolyn, the blue-eyed young woman who had brought Terrell into the restaurant, asked. "Yes," Terrell nodded, "but I don't want to go there." Why? Terrell didn't hide anything from these kind people. She told them everything, about her loving but alcoholic mother, their poverty, her siblings, and how cold their apartment was. But in the summer it was cosy. She talked about school and how the 6th grade boys teased her, calling her a tramp, though her classmates never did. Carolyn listened intently, seeming to understand Terrell better than anyone else. That's why Terrell felt comfortable sharing her story so openly. She didn't quite understand why, but it made her feel lighter. "Oh, you poor thing," Kiara said sympathetically. She too had been listening to Terrell's story. "Terrell, listen," Carolyn said. "Come see us after school, whenever you can, even every day. If the manager isn't around, we'll feed you here in the kitchen, and if he is, we'll give you something to take with you. We always have plenty of leftovers. What do you think?" "What do I think? I think it's wonderful." Terrell gazed in awe at the people around her, so kind and warm. She felt their support, and it was simply wonderful. "I really, really want this," the girl finally exclaimed. "I can't even believe it." Kiara hugged her tightly, and soon Carolyn joined them, followed by others. Even the stern chef was smiling at the sight. "Well, that's settled then," Carolyn said. "While the manager is away, you can explore the place, but don't approach the guests. They might not like it." "Oh, thank you," Terrell replied. "I'm so curious to see what a restaurant looks like inside, and to get a closer look at the train." "The train is indeed a marvel," Carolyn smiled. "Go ahead and explore." Terrell set off to investigate the restaurant. It had several rooms, each uniquely decorated. One resembled a palace chamber, with velvet-backed chairs and ornate paintings. Another was like a futuristic cafe, with chrome surfaces and minimalistic design. The third room amazed Terrell with its fake windows, screens displaying a luxurious beach scene, complete with waves and palm trees. It looked so real, as if stepping outside would lead to a sunny summer day, despite it being December. Finally, Terrell found herself in the largest room, where a Christmas tree stood, its branches adorned with a miniature red express train. This was the most beautiful room of all. She slowly circled the tree, admiring the unique ornaments, dolls in elegant dresses, colourful balls, icicles, tiny Santa Clauses, and snowflakes. There was so much to see. Terrell also marvelled at the guests. They seemed from another world, elegant, cheerful, almost unreal. She was particularly drawn to a couple sitting by the window. The woman was incredibly beautiful, like a model from the internet. She had large blue eyes, defined cheekbones, and full lips. Everything she did was graceful and natural, not at all forced. She looked at the man sitting across from her with warmth and love, seemingly asking him for something. Terrell couldn't make out the words from where she stood, but she could see the genuine affection between them. The man was equally striking, with a particularly charming smile that he flashed often. Even though Terrell was young, she could tell that these two truly loved each other. She wished that one day she too could sit in a restaurant with someone who looked at her with such warmth. But she knew that such a life was likely far from her reach. Suddenly the man received a phone call. He answered, furrowing his brow as he struggled to hear over the music playing in the dining hall. He smiled at the woman, said a few words, and stepped out into the vestibule to continue his conversation in quiet. Left alone at the table, the woman's expression changed. Her eyes darted around nervously, and the contentment and joy vanished from her face. Terrell sensed that something was off. The woman seemed poised to do something deceitful. Terrell had always been perceptive, able to read people's intentions through their expressions and gestures, a skill that had often protected her. Terrell watched intently as the woman did something strange. With a quick motion, she pulled a small packet from her purse, emptied its contents into the man's plate, and hid the packet away. She did it all in a matter of seconds, making sure no one was watching. She likely didn't notice Terrell. The girl's heart raced as she realized what she had just witnessed. Terrell quickly understood the gravity of the situation. She had witnessed something terrible. If the man returned and ate the soup, which likely contained a dissolved powder, he would face serious trouble, possibly even death. The woman must have intended to poison him. Terrell had seen such plots in movies. Why else would someone secretly add powder to food? She couldn't believe how deceptive appearances could be. Initially, the woman seemed like a kind fairy, but now she looked like a beautiful yet evil witch. Terrell knew she had to act immediately. The responsibility weighing on her young shoulders was immense. She considered telling Carolyn, but finding and explaining everything to her would take too long. The man could return and eat the poisoned soup any moment. No, she had to act swiftly and directly. Terrell nodded to herself, determined, and hurried toward the door leading to the lobby. She spotted the man immediately. He was sitting on a leather couch, engrossed in a phone conversation, gesturing animatedly. It seemed like an important call. Terrell hid behind a column, waiting. Carolyn had asked her not to approach or speak to the guests, as it might upset them. But this was an exceptional case. However, she felt anxious. How could she just approach such an important person? He was handsome, wealthy, and grown up. What if he didn't believe her? What if he got angry and chased her away? What if she had misunderstood the situation? Doubts flooded her mind, and her palms grew sweaty with nerves. Yet, when the man ended his call, Terrell stepped forward. "Hello," she murmured. "Hello there," the man replied kindly, looking at her with warmth. "I need to tell you, please don't eat your soup. Ask for a different one, or just say you don't want it." "And why is that?" The man looked at Terrell with curiosity and surprise. "Because," Terrell hesitated. It was harder than she thought to reveal such a truth. "Because I saw the woman you're with put something in your soup when you left. I think it's poison." "Poison?" The man still smiled, but his eyes gradually turned cold and frightening. He probably thought she was making up a story, this impudent girl who dared to speak to him and utter such nonsense. "Well, I'm not sure if it's poison, but she added something. Maybe it's just some spices." Terrell herself was beginning to doubt what she had seen. "But think why she did it after you left, and so quickly, as if she didn't want anyone to see." "You saw this yourself? And this isn't some game? You're telling the truth?" "Yes." Terrell could see that the man believed her, and that her words were causing him pain. But she had to tell him. If something happened to him, she would feel terrible. She liked this man, his open, kind gaze and gentle voice. He seemed like a good person, undeserving of being poisoned. No one deserved that. "I could be wrong, of course," Terrell added, "but you shouldn't eat that soup." "All right," the man smiled. "Thank you for being so observant." He reached into his pockets and pulled out several bills. "Here, buy yourself something. A little gift from me for the new year." "Thank you," Terrell said, delighted. With this money she could buy so much. Her heart fluttered with joy at the thought of the shopping spree ahead. The worries that had weighed on her just moments ago faded away, replaced by a sense that everything would be all right. The man returned to the dining hall. Terrell, after waiting a moment, followed him. She was curious to see how he would act now. Hiding behind the Christmas tree, she watched the couple at the window table. The man sat down as if nothing had happened, and the conversation between the pair resumed. The woman looked as charming and in love as before, but Terrell was no longer fooled by the serene scene. She had formed her own opinion of this beauty. The man seemed in no hurry to try his soup. He asked his companion questions, while she appeared nervous and anxious. Several times she urged him to start eating, but he delayed. Terrell watched curiously, wondering what he would do. Would he simply avoid the food, or did he have another plan? Just then, musicians took the stage, filling the room with live music. Terrell's attention was momentarily drawn to the performers in their elegant attire, with their intriguing instruments and equipment. When she looked back at the couple, she was shocked to see the man calmly eating the soup, the very soup that had been tampered with. The woman, seemingly at ease now, also began to eat. Terrell couldn't believe it. She had tried to warn him, but it seemed he hadn't believed her. She considered rushing from her hiding spot to knock the plate to the floor before he ate too much. But what would that accomplish? She might be banned from the restaurant, losing her new friends and the delicious food, yet saving a life was more important. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The woman began to cough violently, clutching at the tablecloth and pulling it toward her, sending dishes crashing to the floor. The commotion drew everyone's attention. The man quickly pulled out his phone, presumably to call for help. Staff and patrons rushed to the table, blocking Terrell's view. She couldn't see what was happening anymore, but the urgency in the air was palpable. Carolyn approached Terrell, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. "Are you scared, little one?" she asked, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Yes, a little. What's happening?" The woman suddenly felt ill. "We're not sure why. An ambulance has been called, and the manager has been notified. Soon, doctors, the police, and our strict boss will be here. You should head home now, but make sure to come back tomorrow after school. I'll be waiting for you, and so will others." "Okay, I will." Terrell smiled at Carolyn. She quickly got dressed and hurried home. Terrell couldn't make sense of it all. The woman had put powder in the man's soup, and he had tasted it. But it was the woman who fell ill. Was it a coincidence? Maybe the woman had a condition like asthma, similar to their neighbour. Either way, Terrell was determined to ask Carolyn about it the next day. Perhaps more would be known by then. The following day, Terrell could hardly wait for school to end so she could rush to the restaurant. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Even as she fell asleep, she wondered what had transpired and whether she had saved the man. At the restaurant, Terrell was welcomed like family. Carolyn was delighted to see her and led her to the kitchen. The manager was absent again, called to the police station regarding the previous day's incident. But what had happened? Was anything known yet? Asked the girl. Not really. The boss hasn't shared much information, but we are expecting a kitchen inspection the next day, so we won't be able to meet. But come by the day after tomorrow, answered Carolyn. By the way, I have a granddaughter about your age, Kiera chimed in. I'll bring you her jacket. It's almost new and very warm, much better than the one you're wearing. You can't go through winter in that. It felt wonderful to be under the wing of these kind people. Even Chef Paul no longer scowled at Terrell. He silently fried her an egg, again in the shape of a heart. Samuel invited Vanessa to the restaurant to celebrate his latest victory. Yes, in the coming year he was opening a branch of his gas station in another city, conquering new territory. His business was growing, and so were his profits. Samuel had every reason to be proud of his accomplishments. His father had passed away suddenly, leaving him a struggling gas station as his inheritance. At the time, Samuel had just graduated from university and had no idea what to do with the failing business. He hadn't been particularly close to his father, who lived separately and with whom he had only occasional contact. Though his father had provided gifts and paid child support dutifully, their relationship lacked warmth. Samuel was surprised to learn that his father had bequeathed the gas station to him rather than to his half-sisters from his second marriage. His mother, still bitter about her ex-husband's departure, advised Samuel to sell the station and avoid the headache. Initially, Samuel considered selling, but he decided to take the reins of the small business and see what he could make of it. Despite his mother's warnings about the potential for debt, Samuel was determined to revive and strengthen his father's legacy. He delved into the nuances of the business, learned from successful competitors, and constantly sought new knowledge. His perseverance paid off, though the journey was fraught with challenges, including the debts his mother had predicted. Samuel's efforts eventually bore fruit. Now, Samuel owned a chain of gas stations, with locations not only in his hometown, but across the country. Next year, he planned to expand into a major city, aiming to establish a significant presence there. If successful, this move would elevate his business to an entirely new level. Samuel's financial success allowed him to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle, including a luxurious apartment in the city centre and a beautiful car. He could afford almost anything he had ever dreamed of, and he didn't hesitate to shower his mother with gifts, acknowledging her sacrifices in raising him. His father, though not present during his upbringing, had given him a valuable start in life, for which Samuel was grateful. Samuel regretted not having the chance to know his father better before his passing. He believed they could have understood each other and perhaps even become friends. However, he did not maintain relationships with his half-sisters, who resented him for not inheriting all of their father's estate. One of them attempted to reconcile when Samuel's success became evident, but her insincerity only pushed him further away. As a successful businessman, Samuel had to reassess his circle of friends. Many of those he once considered close began to exploit him for his money and connections. It took time for him to realize this, but eventually he narrowed down his social circle to include only genuine and reliable people. Though some saw him as ruthless, Samuel understood the necessity of being firm in business. Despite his success, Samuel struggled to form meaningful relationships with women. While he had no shortage of admirers, he questioned the sincerity of their interest. Were they genuinely attracted to him, or were they merely seeking a comfortable life? This uncertainty led to a series of disappointing romances, as he found many women to be materialistic and more interested in his wealth than in him as a person. Soon he began to feel like a resource, an appendage to these nymphs. It was very unpleasant, and the girls, who initially seemed smart, wise and empathetic, turned out to be shallow. They watched videos and took courses on how to win the heart of a rich man, quoting things from the internet, skillfully creating a good first impression, but inside there was emptiness. "You're to blame," his cousin would sometimes scold him. Lena, with whom he had a trusting relationship since childhood, now led the accounting department of his company. He had no doubts about her. "You're drawn to doll-like appearances, big eyes, full lips, a nice figure. Look deeper. Can't a beautiful girl be intelligent, honest and sincere? Can't she truly love someone? Maybe, but you're attached to the flashy, the striking, those who focus on appearance rather than substance." Samuel felt that he needed more. Yes, he enjoyed the life of a wealthy single workaholic, and the attention of young beauties flattered him, but he yearned for something greater. He dreamed of finding his soulmate, a woman with whom he could fall asleep and wake up in an embrace, something he could share everything with, knowing she would understand, support, and not judge him. He would care for her, protect her, make her happy, and move mountains for her. That was the kind of love and relationship he longed for. Meeting Vanessa happened at just the right moment, when Samuel felt a deep longing for a close companion, a kindred spirit. She was a waitress in the cafeteria on the first floor of the business centre, where his company's main office was located. He often went there for a cup of coffee with a pastry or a quick bite. Vanessa was always polite and friendly with him, but Samuel didn't take it personally. He thought she was simply doing her job. Well, part of which was being courteous to customers. Then one evening, Samuel went downstairs late, having stayed long to work on a report. Samuel had always relied on himself for crucial decisions, rarely delegating key responsibilities to his deputies. This often led to late nights at the office. The cafeteria had long since closed, and only the dim wall lights illuminated the first floor. He bid the security guard good night and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. As he did so, he noticed a familiar figure, a waitress from the cafe, sitting on a bench near the business centre, seemingly in tears. He couldn't just walk by. "Is everything all right? Do you need help?" he asked gently. The young woman looked up at him with tear-streaked eyes. No, everything's fine." She tried to smile, as if slipping back into her professional demeanour, despite her workday having ended long ago. But Samuel could see that something was wrong. He sat down beside her. "Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" he said. "You're my favourite waitress, always smiling, always spreading positivity. So?" Samuel genuinely wanted to help her. She looked so unhappy and vulnerable. For the first time he noticed her beauty, her delicate features, large blue eyes and slender figure. She began to share her story. It was a long and rather disheartening tale. Vanessa had grown up in a small village, about 100 kilometres from the city. Like many young people, she had left her rural home searching for better opportunities. She dreamed of becoming a designer, but failed to gain admission to her chosen college due to a lack of technical skills. "They said I had the talent and the taste, but I didn't know how to work in the required techniques. Where could I have learned? Our village had no such activities. The local city kids had been attending art and design classes since elementary school. I didn't stand a chance against them," she explained. Returning to the village, where prospects were slim, was not an option for Vanessa, so she took a job as a waitress, hoping to find her way in the city. Vanessa had initially worked in a bar, but it wasn't safe for a young woman, so she moved to a restaurant and eventually to a cafe in a business centre. She enjoyed her job there, the pay was good, the clients were polite, and the schedule was convenient for her studies. Vanessa had enrolled in a prestigious economics program, balancing work and education without any support. She was proud of her progress and the prospects ahead. Suddenly, everything changed. "Our cafe has a new director," Vanessa sighed. "He's taken an interest in me and began to show me attention, despite my efforts to remain neutral and avoid him. His advances became more insistent, and his intentions clearer. Today he called me into his office and presented me with an ultimatum: become his lover or lose her job. He gave me time until the next day to decide, reminding me that there were plenty of other candidates willing to take my place. And I need this job," Vanessa sobbed. "The schedule is perfect, the pay is good, and I've grown accustomed to it. What am I going to do?" Samuel felt an urge of righteous anger. He had seen the new director, an unremarkable middle-aged man with a protruding belly and small beady eyes. Despite being married with 3 children, this man was shamelessly pursuing Vanessa. "Wait," Samuel said, an idea forming in his mind. "Where did you say you're studying?" "I'm in my final year at an economics university, and then I'll graduate." "Listen, I actually have a part-time job for you. It's a job for students, and if you need help, our employees will assist you." "I would really, really like that." Vanessa looked at Samuel with hopeful eyes. His spine tingled at her gaze. Besides Vanessa, he felt strong, decisive and kind, a true knight. "So tomorrow tell your boss that you're quitting. Just leave. Let him rush to find a new waitress." Vanessa beamed with happiness, and her joy was the best reward for Samuel. He felt a new sensation blossoming in his heart. He enjoyed being her saviour and wanted to continue their connection. "It's late. Let me drive you home." "Thank you. That would be very helpful." On the way, they chatted like old friends. Vanessa turned out to be intelligent and well-read. She loved history and animals, just like Samuel. They discovered they enjoyed the same movies and books, a wonderful coincidence. By the time Samuel dropped Vanessa off at her apartment, they both knew something serious and genuine had sparked between them. Vanessa started working at Samuel's firm and immediately showed promise as a prospective specialist. The head of the economics department praised her. "She lacks experience, but her grasp is already strong. This girl will go far." Samuel smiled, pleased to hear such words about his beloved. Yes, beloved. By then he knew he was in love. Vanessa was tender and gentle with him, yet firm and cool with others. This contrast captivated him. She always sensed Samuel's moods keenly, never demanding anything or hinting at expensive gifts, unlike many before her. But Samuel was ready to lay everything he had at her feet. Never before had his feelings been so overwhelming. Vanessa cared for him and gladly accepted his care in return. They were the perfect couple, so it wasn't long before Samuel proposed. Why wait? He was confident he had finally found his soulmate. Their understanding was so profound that it seemed almost unbelievable. After the wedding, life continued as usual. Samuel dreamed of having children, but it turned out that Vanessa was having difficulties conceiving. She was troubled by this, though not because she desperately wanted children. She had other goals at the time. Vanessa knew how much Samuel wanted to be a father, and her inability to fulfill this wish troubled her. Samuel, of course, assured her that it wasn't the most important thing. He couldn't bear to see sadness in her eyes. Lena, Samuel's cousin, didn't quite trust Vanessa, which slightly bothered him. He wanted his loved ones to get along. "I don't know," Lena would say, shaking her head. "She seems fake to me. Just like your previous girlfriends, but smarter and more dangerous. She's a better actress." Samuel argued and praised Vanessa's qualities to Lena, believing that his cousin would eventually understand. Then Vanessa left the company to start her own business, a long-held dream of hers. Samuel, of course, helped Vanessa with money and advice. She bought a coffee shop, fulfilling her dream of owning a place where she once worked as a waitress. Now she was often away from home, understandably busy with her new venture. She travelled to other cities on business and stayed late at the office. Samuel understood her dedication better than anyone. However, strange rumours began to reach him. Supposedly, Vanessa had a lover. At first, Samuel dismissed these whispers. They were a prominent couple, and gossip often surrounded such figures. But the insinuations grew more frequent. Vanessa seemed to remain the same loving, attentive partner, yet she also seemed to be drifting away. Samuel had some vague suspicions, nothing concrete, just a shadow cast over their seemingly perfect relationship. He decided to surprise Vanessa with a late lunch at a fancy restaurant in the middle of the work week, celebrating a lucrative contract that would open a new branch in a promising city, a significant milestone for their family. Vanessa agreed enthusiastically, much to Samuel's delight. He had expected to have to persuade her, as she had been quite busy lately. The restaurant was beautifully decorated, perfect for a festive mood. Samuel shared his success with Vanessa, who was genuinely happy for him. "You've always been smart, successful and decisive. I never doubted you," she said, looking at him with the same admiration as years ago. In moments like this, Samuel forgot all his doubts and rumours, simply enjoying the happiness of being with the woman he loved. They decided to start with cheese soup and then order something special for dessert. It was a celebration, after all. Just as they were about to order, Samuel's phone rang. It was his assistant. As Samuel finished his urgent call in the hallway, a small, pale girl approached him. She was thin, with a sharp upturned nose and large eyes that dominated her face. Dressed in worn, ill-fitting clothes, she earnestly tried to convince Samuel that Vanessa had put something in his soup. Initially, Samuel was inclined to dismiss the girl's claims as childish fantasies, but something in her voice and eyes suggested she was telling the truth, or at least believed she was. Given the recent tension between him and Vanessa, Samuel couldn't entirely ignore the girl's warning. He returned to the table, but hesitated to touch the soup, despite Vanessa's urging. As musicians took the stage and began setting up their instruments, a loud clatter distracted Vanessa. And before Samuel could realize what he was doing, he switched his and Vanessa's plates. Quickly, literally instantly. And then he started eating. Vanessa, seeing Samuel eating, smiled and began her meal. Soon she started coughing and gasping for air. Her face paled, then turned blue. Panicked, Samuel called an ambulance, his mind racing with the girl's words. It seemed she had been right. Vanessa had intended to poison him, but his quick action had reversed their fates. Samuel's decision to switch the plates was driven by a lingering doubt about the truth of the girl's story. He couldn't fully believe that Vanessa had actually attempted to poison him, but he also couldn't ignore the possibility. The tragic irony was that his precaution led to Vanessa's near-fatal consequences instead. The ambulance arrived swiftly, but Vanessa's condition was critical. The medical team worked frantically, administering treatments and setting up an IV drip, but her life hung in the balance. "Does she have any chronic illnesses?" the doctor asked. "It must be poisoning," Sam blurted out. "Poisoning? What kind? Is it known? Speak up quickly. We're going to lose her. It's important." With her last ounce of strength, Vanessa named the poison, inadvertently confirming her guilt while also saving her own life. This revelation made everything crystal clear to Samuel. Vanessa had indeed intended to poison him with the very substance now coursing through her veins. Fortunately, knowing the specific poison allowed the medical team to act quickly and save Vanessa. Had Samuel eaten the soup, his chances of survival would have been slim, as Vanessa would likely not have aided the doctors. The ensuing investigation revealed the grim truth. Vanessa confessed to her crime, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. Surveillance footage from the dining hall and the discovery of the poison in her purse sealed her fate. Her motive was a sadly familiar tale. A small-town girl seeking a better life, yet genuinely in love with a boy from her village. Her ambition and desire for a different life had led her down a dark path, ultimately exposing her true intentions. Vanessa and her accomplice had planned to secure a comfortable future by eliminating Samuel, who would have provided them with wealth. Vanessa had orchestrated their meeting, meticulously preparing by learning everything about Samuel, which explained why he was so surprised by their compatibility. They shared the same interests and views on life, only because Vanessa had studied him thoroughly. After marrying, the next step in their plan was to eliminate Samuel. As his legal widow, Vanessa would inherit the majority of his fortune, becoming truly wealthy and free. They chose a rare and dangerous poison that quickly broke down in the body, making it nearly impossible to determine the cause of death. It seemed like the perfect plan. However, fate intervened in the form of a little girl hiding near the Christmas tree. She witnessed everything and warned Samuel. For some reason he believed her and instinctively switched their plates. The rest unfolded as it did. Vanessa and her accomplice were arrested. She received a lengthy sentence as the primary perpetrator, while he got a lesser sentence as an accomplice. Both received what they deserved. Terrell, as usual, visited the restaurant after school to see her friends and have lunch. She was always welcomed warmly. Even the manager didn't mind her visits and had grown fond of her. Terrell was always treated to meals and listened to with care. That day, Terrell was studying history with Kiara when the man whose life she had saved appeared in the doorway. She knew how his story had unfolded and felt proud of her actions. Samuel stood before her, smiling, with a beautifully wrapped box in his hands. "Hello, my little saviour," he said, looking at Terrell. "I never properly thanked you for saving my life." "You're welcome," Terrell replied with a smile. "It wasn't that hard, really." "This is for you," Samuel said, handing her the box. "And Terrell, I'm aware of your situation. Therefore, I'm going to pay for your mother's treatment for her addiction. And while she's in treatment, you'll all be looked after by a nanny I've hired. I have already rented an apartment for you, and I intend to renovate your apartment. I have also hired a teacher who will help you and your siblings with your studies. Everything will work out, my dear, and I'll be keeping an eye on your future, little one. You've been like a guardian angel to me." "Wow!" Carolyn exclaimed. "Terrell, it's your chance for a better life." Terrell was silent, trying to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. She understood that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. The adults around her smiled warmly, sharing in her joy and anticipation.